the development. But we are grateful for your participation and look forward to a great presentation from Elaine. So Dave, I'll turn it back to you for the ground rules.
Great, thanks, John. Yeah, I'm going to cover the ground rules fairly quickly here, and then I'll move on to the program. What we do is we ask everybody to keep their camera on so we can know we're dealing with real people, but to mute your microphone during the presentation. Elaine has graciously agreed that she's going to allow people to interrupt her. They want to ask questions or raise comments. So there, if you notice at the bottom of the program, there's a way to raise your hand. So if you have a question or comment while she's speaking, please raise your hand and she'll call on you to do it. We also asked you to use the chat function to submit some comments and questions if you have any. We will gather those and ask those at the end of the session. We do record the program. We will post it on the Berks Alliance website. We share it with BCTV, and we send a copy to everybody who registers for the event. So you will get a copy of the video you can watch again at your leisure. And please feel free to share it with anybody you think might be interested in learning more about this topic. So with that, I'm going to turn to Elaine Schaefer, who is the CEO of the Schuylkill River I'll say it right now, Schuylkill River Greenways. And there's some exciting news that she's going to be sharing with us today. So Elaine, to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad to be here today. I'm Elaine Schaefer. I'm the Executive Director of Schuylkill River Greenways National Heritage Area. I do have with me today from our staff, Julia Hurl, if you want to give a wave, Julia. She is our Trails Director. And when the questions get technical about the trails, she will be answering them and not I. And I also noticed that we have two of our board members on this call, John Wolf and David Toon. So thank you to John and David for joining us. And maybe they'll pipe in at some point as well. So I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to share, and I'm going to cover a lot of ground. So I'm going to cover things kind of quickly and at a surface level for most of it. But by all means, please raise your hand if you want to dive deeper into something while we're talking about it. And use the raise hand function, please, because I can't keep up with the chat while I'm talking, but I can see the raise hand when the screen is up. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now. And we'll make this prettier, take up the whole screen. All right, so Schuylkill River Greenways, we are, our territory is all 5 counties that the river goes through, starting in Philadelphia. So it is Philadelphia, Montgomery, Chester, Berks, and Schuylkill counties. And our mission, as you see here, I'm not going to read that fancy mission statement. Instead, I'm going to tell you what it really boils down to, which is connecting people and communities to the river, the Schuylkill River, and its heritage and culture. And the end game of that, really engaging residents and communities with the river, is so that they embrace the river, they learn its culture and history, they experience it, and then they become stewards and protectors of the river. And we create a whole army of people who are invested in the river, which serves as the source of drinking water for over 2 million people, but it's also been an economic driver of this region since the beginning of our nation. We have a strategic plan, and the number one goal of that strategic plan is to finish the Schuylkill River Trail. The way that we engage people with the river, we have many different tools, but the number one tool we use is the Schuylkill River Trail. We find that people who recreate next to the river develop that relationship with the river. Now, as you know, the Schuylkill River Trail starts in Philadelphia and eventually will go all the way up to Frackville. About 80 miles of the 120 that are planned are built, and those 80 miles take you just to Reading. Now, as you all know, there's still a gap left that is in Montgomery County that will be filled next summer, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But once that is filled next summer, the trail will be complete from Philadelphia to Reading. Our work that lies ahead of us is to finish the trail between Reading and Frackville. And that section of trail, Berks and Schuylkill County, Schuylkill River Greenways is the entity that is doing the building, doing the planning and the building and the maintaining. And we own about 35 miles of the trail. Just as an aside, all of the other sections of trail that are in the counties, Chester County, Montgomery County, Philadelphia County, are owned and operated by the counties. Except for Phoenixville. Phoenixville has their own little section, but the rest of the trail is owned and maintained by the counties. For now, it's Schuylkill River Greenways, a nonprofit that does it in Berks and Schuylkill County. We're going to talk about some of the active projects as we go through this PowerPoint. But first, I want to take a few minutes and tell you a little bit about the other things we do other than the trail, because the trail is one tool we use to connect people to the river, but we also have several other ways to connect people to the river. The first thing, oh, and I wanted to mention also that we produce the Schuylkill River Trail map, which we have 70,000 copies of. We've just updated it. So if anybody's interested in getting a box to give out to your constituents and your followers, let us know, and we will make sure that you get a box to give out. This is also online interactively that you can use through our website, but people love the hard copy of the trail. You know, no matter how handy it is online, people really like to have the hard copy. So we keep making it, and we run out of 70,000 copies after about 2 years. Which is about how often you need to update it, given all the new trail sections that are getting built. So on to other ways that we connect people to the river, our events. We have lots of programming on the river, and the signature event that we have that most people associate with us with is the Schuylkill River Sojourn, which is a 7-day trip that starts in Schuylkill Haven and ends in Philadelphia. We do it in June every year. This coming June is our 25th anniversary of this incredible trip. And it's just a beautiful, wonderful connection to the river of about 200 paddlers that participate every year. We also do a ride for the river, which we've been doing for about the last, I think, 6 or 7 years. And that's in September. Next year, it will be September 30th. And we do it in partnership with Sly Fox, one of our partners. We do a art show every year. It's called Scenes of the Schuylkill, that is coming up next week, our art reception on the November 10th. Beautiful artwork centered on the watershed and the river. And we have a fundraiser in conjunction with that. Get on our website if you're interested in joining us. It's at MCCC in Pottstown. And then finally, we do lots of smaller programs called Pedal and Paddles, which are sort of bite-sized introductory programs, getting people on the river. We do them up and down the river. It's a little less intimidating than a 7-day kayaking trip. And we have great success with those. We have an education program as well. Most of our education is delivered to school-age children, although we do some college programming over the winter, and we do some high school vocational teaching, connecting high schoolers to careers in the environment. And our education program last year and next year is focusing on a capstone project called Riverzilla in Reading. Which is a big 1-day festival on the riverfront in Reading, offering free kayaking and free bikes, and also inviting all of our partners to come and meet the community. And we will be doing that again next summer. We also have a restoration fund, which is a program that invests money directly in water quality. And every year we raise about $300,000 to $500,000 from private entities and some public entities to invest in partners who do projects to keep the water quality high. At the top of the river in Schuylkill County, that is a lot of coal silt remediation. In the middle of the river in Berks County area, that's a lot of agricultural runoff that we treat. And down by Philadelphia, it's almost all stormwater management. These pictures here are of some, I think, Montgomery County projects, but we do a lot of projects in Berks County. And one of our favorite partners who does a lot of these projects is Berks Nature. Then finally, I wanted to share that many of you may know this, but about 3 years ago during the pandemic, we purchased our partner outfitter, which was a private business. And we have now turned that into a nonprofit and made it an arm of our organization that offers, it really has increased our capacity to get people on the river. And it allows us to deliver our educational and our outreach programming to so many more people. Last summer alone, we had 3,200 people on the river through using our partnership with Take It Outdoors. We have a hub of Take It Outdoors in Pottstown in Riverfront Park, where you can walk up and get a free bike and ride a bike, or rent a kayak or do a guided kayak tour. And of course, we deliver all of our programming through Take It Outdoors. Now, we're going to move on to some trail talk. I'm going to take you through some of the projects that we're working on. This here is a beautiful map that Julia created, sort of the whole trail starting in Philadelphia and ending up in Frackville. The green sections, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but if you can, here we are in Reading, and you'll see it's all green going into Philadelphia. This section right here is off-road right now. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but the rest of it is all built except for a small section right entering Pottstown right now, which will be finished next year. Here we are in Reading, and you'll notice a lot of red between Reading and Hamburg. And that is what we're focusing on that now. And we just completed a feasibility study, which we'll talk about in a moment. Then you get up into Schuylkill County. This part is built right now there. That section from Hamburg to Auburn, in my opinion, is the most beautiful section of the trail. We have just finished a bridge over the Schuylkill at that gap right there in Auburn. And we are in the middle of extending that trail and connecting to this already built section in Auburn right now. We have just last week finished upgrading some trail in this section up here in Tumbling Run. And then we'll talk a little bit about this later. Up at the very top from Mill Creek to Frackville, we are doing final engineering and design of about 5 miles this year. And that's a really exciting piece, which we'll talk about in a moment. So this is just to give you your bearings of the whole trail and what we're working on right now. So this is a section in Berks County that many of you may recognize. This is 724, and this used to be a section of the trail that had a steep decline crossing this very busy road and then a steep incline. It was absolutely horrid, and everybody complained about it. So about 2 years ago, we got some great funding from a variety of sources, public and private, and we built this bridge, the Whitaker Bridge, which we christened about a year or so ago. And it has been very, very well received. The community is thrilled to have this safe crossing in Berks County. This is the bridge in Auburn that I just referred to, leaving Hamburg and entering Schuylkill County up at about 7 miles north of Hamburg. This is what it used to look like, the old railroad bridge crossing the Schuylkill River, and this is what it looks like now. This is on the other side. When you get to the other side in Schuylkill County, there's a fence that says you can't go any farther right now. But happily, we are doing finalizing the engineering. We have a contractor hired for the construction. This trail will take a left turn and go down alongside the railroad on the other side of the river and connect to River Road, and then eventually connect to the existing trail in Auburn. This is the Mill Creek section that I pointed out earlier, up at the very top of the river, starting in St. Clair and going up to Frackville. The very interesting thing about this trail, this section of trail, is at the base, right when the trail exits the little town of St. Clair and starts to go up into the mountain, there's a shopping center there called Coal Creek Shopping Center. Our trail will go through that shopping center safely, but there's a creek that you have to cross. And PennDOT has a new program where they rehabilitate old historic bridges when they have to replace them. And instead of scrapping them, they move them to serve as kind of pedestrian and cultural historic resources. This is the first experimental try of this new program. And this bridge has been relocated from nearby in Mount Carbon. It will be it's been taken down, and right now I think it's in Ohio or it's somewhere in a warehouse being refurbished, and it will be rebuilt, crossing over the creek in the Coal Creek Plaza to start off the mountain section of this trail. And this is a rendition of what it will look like crossing Mill Creek. Then when you leave the parking lot, you will go through and have miles of gorgeous trail that will look like this, of course, with a trail in the middle. It's a really exciting project that we're engineering right now, and hopefully we'll start building next summer if we can get the funding. We're looking for about $3.5 million of funding. So if anybody's looking to make a donation, it's only $3.5 million. This is the section I just mentioned about coming into Pottstown. Right now, the trail ends right at the 422 bridge. They opened a 4-mile section that in Chester County last year. And with this last connection, it will, as I said, go all the way from Philly to Reading. This is 724 coming up out of Chester County. And then you will cross over the Schuylkill River on the 422 bridge. You can see the bike section on the bridge now when you're on 422. It's not open, but you can see it. And then you will descend from the bridge, do a little loop-de-loo, go back under the bridge. And this land all here, the county has rights to put the trail through, and then hook up with the existing trail that is already built on Industrial Highway. And Industrial Highway takes you right into Pottstown Riverfront Park, where we are, and then up into Berks County. So I showed you that map and you saw all those red sections in Berks County. There are about 23, 24 miles to build in Berks County. So last year we got funding from a variety of sources, including the Wyoming Foundation, Berks County themselves, DCED, and a few other sources to do an alignment study to take from Reading to Hamburg, which is where this yellow circle is, and to figure out where we're going to build this trail. We've been working on this for about a year with a big team and a steering committee of about 60 stakeholders across the county. And we are just about ready to make that study final and public, which will happen late this fall. But I'm going to show you a few sections that might be of interest to you. The city of Reading itself has actually made some progress already, even before this study is done. If you can get your bearings here is this river coming through Reading. Here is Penn Street right here. The trail is coming into Reading through right here, where my cursor is, if you can see it. The trail will go along Front Street. It will go under the Penn Street Bridge, and then go along River Road, and then through this Riverview area, under the Buttonwood Bridge, and then up into where the Cartech area is. Already, the city of Reading has finished the Penn Street to Buttonwood section. So if you've driven River Road lately, you've noticed that there's a set aside bike lane that will be buffered. I don't know if it's buffered yet. So it will be on the River Road, but buffered away from traffic. Their next section, the next phase that they will be working on is this Penn Street to where basically where the Rack Bridge is now, the pedestrian bridge that goes over the river. And that is phase 2. They have the engineering, they have the funding already to do that final engineering. So that will happen soon. And then once that's engineered, they will get the construction funding to finish that section. Here's a rendition of a preliminary rendition of what that will look like on Front Street in front of Rack. So the college is right here. This is the traffic, and then the college would be giving up some parking on that road to create this buffered lane on Front Street. Again, we're looking at Reading. Here is the river, and let me get my bearings here. This section is coming up north of the section I just showed you, coming out of Reading. Here's the Buttonwood Bridge. This is what's called the Riverview Trail at this point, which does exist. There is a trail along the Schuylkill River, and this is that connects you up here. This is Cartack up here. However, this trail that currently exists could not technically be part of the circuit trail system because it's in pretty poor condition. It's many places it's placed far too close to the river, and it's not safe, it's not well lit, it's not inviting. So we have actually applied for funding this fall in partnership with the city to do a feasibility study and some preliminary engineering on how this trail could be improved and moved to become part of the Schuylkill River Trail. And it will likely involve moving some of it, widening it, lighting it, making it safe and inviting. And it will connect Reading all the way up to here, this is Cartack right here, and then which heads into Muhlenberg. Let's get to the next slide. Once you get into Muhlenberg, here is, this is coming from Reading here. So the orientation has shifted slightly. There are a lot of lines on this map, but what I want to show you is this green line right here. This is Kelly's Lock, and this is Laurel Run up here. As part of this feasibility study, we did an early action project so that we could get started right away, so that this study would not sit on a shelf. And last round, we applied with Muhlenberg for funding to construct this trail, this section of trail, get it started already. And Muhlenberg received that funding. So this will start right away. And this will be part of the Schuylkill River Trail coming out, north of Reading. Here it is again, and sort of north-south oriented map. And this is the section of trail that will be built. And you can see here, we got the funding, $140,000 from DCNR. Berks County contributed with a $50,000 grant from their ARPA funding. And the city, borough of Muhlenberg is contributing a lot of in-kind work by doing some of the work themselves. This is the section that I showed you that is off-road in Berks County between Birdsboro and Gibraltar. We studied 3 different alternatives to getting that off-road. It is currently on-road. I'm sorry if I just misspoke. It's on-road right now. We're trying to get it off-road. This purple section is through Exeter, and that has been eliminated as a possibility. So we are looking at this red line section here, and then either this section right next to the river or this section here, depending on our discussion with landowners. But we will be taking that section off-road as well. You may remember 2 summers ago, I think it is now, during the pandemic, we had a major rehabilitation project to rehabilitate and revive and revitalize the section of the Schuylkill River Trail that exists, but it had been a little neglected coming into Reading. So just south of the Reading, the Rack Bridge, before you cross the river into Reading. And with that project, this is a map of, how the trail is aligned up there coming into Reading. And with that project, we put in new lighting, which you can't really see how bright this is here, but it's very, very bright lighting. We installed safety cameras on the trail, which this is one of the camera views. We have 3 different views that are online all the time, and we have constant surveillance. This has been a section of the trail that has had some incidents over the last decade or so. And our board made the decision that it was time to really invest in this area We did some fundraising and we did a significant amount of work, which we have been keeping up. So we put new lighting, new cameras, we resurfaced the whole trail, we did new landscaping, we have installed and continue to install signage, we painted the bridge, we painted over the graffiti, and one fun thing we did was plant, I think, 4,000 bulbs so that every spring it would, have this beautiful reawakening every spring, and we could celebrate what a beautiful section of trail that is. And this is my last slide. This is just our staff I wanted to introduce you to here. We have some new staff members. So we're the ones that you may see out on the trail are Julia, of course, who's our trail director, Kevin Kiefreiter, who does a lot of the maintenance work on our trail, and Jacob Gardner, who is a new member of our staff and is working with Julia on the trails. And then lastly, a shameless plug, we have an empty position here. We are hiring an education program manager. If you know anyone who is looking, who is in that field and looking for a job, tell them to reach out to us. So I will go ahead and stop sharing now, but I can call that back up if anybody has specific questions about any of those slides.
So Elaine, what's the time frame for the projects here in Berks County? Is it 12 months or is it 10 years?
For the whole 23 miles, I'd say 10 years.
10 years.
But our goal is, when we have already and will continue to engage each of the communities along the 23 miles. And our goal is to have all of these projects running simultaneously. The study itself divides the Berks County into 10 or 11 different sections. And each of those sections, are about a mile, and it costs about $1 million to $2 million to do 1 or 2 miles. And it takes a couple of years to do 1 or 2 miles. So if you did them all simultaneously, it's realistic to think that these would all get done in the next 5 to 10 years. If we do them one at a time, we're all going to be gone by the time it's done.
Yeah.
So our goal is to engage each of these communities to get a champion within, whether it's their borough council or whether it's a trails group or, someone to embrace it in their own community. And then with our support, of course, we can help with the grant writing. We can help with the coordinating and the navigating and the property ownership. But we can't do all 10 projects ourselves simultaneously. So we're going on a roadshow when the report is final. And our goal will be in each of these communities to say, here's the section in your community. If you care about this and want to be part of the Schuylkill River Trail, we'll help you, but you need to step up.
So you need some help with publicizing the roadshow.
We sure will.
Right?
We sure will. We're not,
Okay.
we haven't quite made public. We want to reach out. We want to speak to all of the prime and more controversial property owners before we unveil it, which we are almost at the point where we can do that. But so it'll be a month or two before we unveil it. But once we do, we would love help getting the word out, having people come to these meetings when we present, and, embracing this process.
Some of the trail looks like it runs along where the rail corridor is. Is Norfolk Southern and the rail lines been cooperative in helping with this?
Well, those are some of the landowners that we need to sit down with. And yes, in the past, we have had cooperative and great relationships with the rail corridors. We haven't had specific conversations about these specific alignments yet. So we'll see.
I want to invite, if anybody wants to raise a question, please raise your hand and go ahead and do that. You said that in all the other areas, the counties have sort of taken on the lead of operating and maintaining the trail. Has there been a conversation with Berks County about ultimately, once we get this done, them taking it over?
Many conversations, many. And I think ultimately in the end, that's a fait accompli, like that is going to happen eventually. We're a 10-person a 10-person nonprofit. Like, when this is
Right.
all built out, it would be beyond our capability. So as it gets built out and as it becomes more of a responsibility, that's going to happen naturally. It's hopefully it will happen in a thought out way. And I think I saw in the Berks, the new Berks County trail plan that's coming out, Greenway's plan, there is some discussion of this, that over time we will need to contemplate transfer to public
A
ownership.
transition. Yeah.
Mhm.
I know the county is talking about doing repairs to the rack bridge. Have you been engaged or involved in that conversation?
We sure have. Julia, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. When we did the project that Elaine was talking about, where we renovated and rehabilitated that area called Craig's Lane, where the trail comes up to the rack bridge, the next step then is the rack bridge. What we'd like to do there is really turn that bridge into a gateway into Reading. That's where you cross over. That's where you get into Reading. It's a beautiful old historic railroad bridge. It's in good shape. That's being verified through studies right now to make sure that it can handle this transition. The plan would be to hopefully, with an art component, bringing out local artists to do some work there, is to design a trail over the bridge that is welcoming and exciting for people, a destination point. The bridge is, of course, owned by the county, but it connects, takes the trail there across into the college property.
I know that there were, we've had earlier conversations here about creative placemaking and how to make that bridge much more attractive and a gateway into the city. And there are, one of the earlier spotlight programs we did was on the murals that are around Reading, the Reading area. There's just an immense number of them, and there's some partners that might be willing to work with that. So we should keep in touch and figure out how to engage in that, because that could be really, really transformative. Who you mentioned the county, and you mentioned working with the municipalities. Who else are your partners here in Berks County?
I mean, you name an organization that works in the environment and works in, economic development, and we're probably partnering with them. I mean, that is the nature of a heritage area. A heritage area is meant to bring together all, to form partnerships and work towards economic development and cultural programming with all the partners. So we partner with Berks Nature, we partner with the Chamber, we partner with all of the municipal governments, environmental advocacy organizations. It's we have a extensive list, and in fact, for the feasibility study project, we had really just great participation from government, from the chamber, from each of the municipalities, trails groups, pedestrian groups. I mean, really, people really care about the Schuylkill River Trail, and importantly, I think everyone acknowledges the economic impact it will have when it is completed and coming through Berks County, and is looking forward to that. It's worth the investment of our time and energy and money to get this done, because it'll pay off in spades in terms of the revitalization that these long distance trails bring.
Could you talk a little bit more about the economic impact, and then I'm going to make you talk about the revitalization impact, because I think they're both very, very important to this community.
Yeah, so 15 years ago, it used to be theory that these trails would bring in economic vitality, and now it's been proven out so many times. It's almost in instinct at this point. But I mean, long distance trails are tourist attractions, and they bring with them a ripple effect in the economy. So there's the immediate spending that happens with people buying sneakers and, sort of direct spending on their bikes and their sneakers to recreate. But then there's also a secondary ripple where people will travel from either across the county, across the state. Sometimes we get calls from Germany, people planning trails on the trip. And those people they'll stay in a bed and breakfast, they will eat meals, they will stop at a brewery or an ice cream store. And that is kind of the secondary effect. And then the tertiary effect, which really is the most impactful, is that trails have a very positive impact on real estate values. And people, developers, apartment builders, and apartment dwellers all want to be near a trail. And so the land around a trail gets much more valuable. And that is, I mean, you can see that if anybody is familiar with New York, this is my favorite example. New York has a short 2-mile trail called the High Line, which was an overgrown railroad bed. A friends group redid it, and it goes through Chelsea and the meat market, the meatpacking district, which used to be the armpit of Manhattan. And now, because of that trail, that is the most expensive real estate in Manhattan. And there is a crane on every building from a trail. And that happens all over the place.
That's really impressive. Yeah, I know that the trails have been very significant in other areas. The trail on the Youghiogheny, the one in northern Pennsylvania by Williamsport to Cedar Run, that area is really neat. So it's exciting to think about. What can people do to help you with this project? What do you need us to do?
Well, we need all sorts of things. First and foremost, volunteers and members. So if you're interested in the trail, become a member, sign up on our volunteer form, and we use a software called Galaxy, and you can say, I'm interested, you put your name in there and say, I'm interested in the trail. And then anytime we have any need on the trail, whether it's a cleanup, whether it's an event, you would get an email. We're going to clean up this section and you're invited to join us. So that's sort of the easiest way to get involved in a first, on the ground way. Secondly, we always need funding. Right now, we are in the first year of a 5-year capital campaign to raise $5 million for the trail. And we're calling it the Stewardship Fund. And we take care of all this trail, and the expense is crippling to us. And it prevents building more trail because we have to spend our money on maintaining. So we're building up a capital fund to pay for maintenance while we build more. And involvement in the Stewardship Fund is one of our greatest needs from our surrounding community. And you can learn more about that and join us on that, either helping us run it or contributing on our website. That's on our website as well. And then finally, and very importantly, as we build trail through these communities, as we come into these communities and make presentations publicly, as we are trying to get, right of way from landowners, having people come out and support us, having people come to public meetings, having people write letters to the editor, having people talk it up with their neighbors. That is really important because that's how we get government funding. That is how we get buy-in from communities. And the more people that are behind us and show the public officials that they're behind us and show the community that they're behind us, the easier it is for us to get the planning and the building done.
Thank you. One of the things that you use in your title, your reference, is that you're a national heritage area. What does that mean, and how does that power what you do?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I usually start out presentations explaining what that is, because nobody knows what a heritage area is. And it basically, I like to describe it as sort of a distant cousin of a national park. And in fact, we do get significant and consistent funding through the National Park Service. But the Heritage Area Program is, whereas a national park is kind of a singular destination with borders that has usually a singular focus. A heritage area is more of a landscape or a region And it celebrates some aspect of our nation's story that is really important to our national identity. So in other parts of the country, heritage areas, one celebrates the Pueblo Nation, one celebrates Niagara Falls, one celebrates the steel industry, one celebrates the Alaskan heritage. Ours focuses on the Schuylkill River because the Schuylkill River was so incredibly important since the beginning of our country. Through the Revolutionary War, it was incredibly important, and Valley Forge Park is right there on the river. Through the Industrial Revolution, the Schuylkill River was actually the industrial superhighway of the Industrial Revolution in this region. Through the Environmental Revolution, the Schuylkill River was the site of the very first ever federally funded river cleanup. And then now we like to say we are the center of the recreational revolution, turning this river into a place where people celebrate the river by recreating and interacting with it. And so our mission in connecting people is at once, and for all heritage areas, it's connecting people to the culture and the heritage of the asset, but also using it as a key for economic development and revitalization. You know, this river was a key to the economy since the beginning of time for all of these river towns, and can and should and will be a key to the future economy. Not only because it produces the water that we all drink, but because it is, will be, and continue, and in some places already is, the economic driver that attracts developers and people who want to live here and companies who want to locate here.
I know that Pennsylvania has like 3 sort of major watersheds. In the Chesapeake Bay, the Susquehanna River, there are lots of challenges in terms of environmental issues relative to that. Are there environmental issues that you guys deal with that you have to address that are important?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier very briefly on one slide, the Restoration Fund. And this river, many of you, I'm sure, have heard it called, you know, Schuylkill Punch and Schuylkill Sludge. This river has a well-deserved, you know, pretty negative history because it used to be the industrial waste dump of the region. However, that has completely changed, and we have done a lot of work to help people understand, help the perception of people understand that that has changed. There has been so much work done to this river, starting in the 1950s with the Schuylkill River Project, which many of the desilting basins still exist, and you can see them. This was the first federal project that was ever, that the government ever funded, was literally taking the coal silt out of the river and dumping it into these big desilting bends, round areas. And many of the dams that are built in the Schuylkill at this point were built for that purpose, to hold the coal silt back. Now that industry doesn't exist to that extent anymore, so that does not continue to be a problem in terms of the refuse coming through now. However, there's still a lot of legacy coal on the sides of the river and coming out of the old mines that are there up in Schuylkill County. In the Berks County region, the main concern is the agricultural runoff. And the runoff that comes from farms and from manure and whatnot. And then, of course, as you get into the denser parts of the river, starting in sort of Montgomery County, but then going into Philadelphia, the level of stormwater runoff and the contents of the stormwater and wastewater runoff creates a great challenge. And that's what our Restoration Fund is meant to address. And we're not the only ones. There's a whole organization called the Schuylkill Action Network of so many organizations working together up and down the river to address all of those problems.
You mentioned the dams and some of them, their historic legacy. Is there, and I know there's also some issues about dams and dam safety. Is that a challenge? Is that an issue that we should be aware of?
It's not, yes, of course, and it's not our issue, it is DEP. So DEP is in charge of the dams, and they, the long-term goal over many, many, many years is to remove the dams. And they're starting up in Schuylkill County, and there is a plan in place right now to remove the Kernsville Dam. And eventually that will go all the way down. I don't think the Fairmount Dam will ever be removed because of the tidal section of the river, but the rivers, the thinking today is that rivers should have their own natural course, and that dams that were built many, many decades ago, the price of keeping them safe is not out, makes it too much of a challenge in face of their limited utility at this point.
Are they an impediment for the recreational use of the river?
Well, it depends on what you're doing in recreating. So if you're kayaking down the river, you don't want any dams. Nobody likes to portage. If you're a motorboat person, you like the dams because you like sort of flat, deep water. So, I think that there are different camps, and believe me, every dam that gets removed, there people on each side. Some of them want removed, some people want them removed, some of them don't.
I'm bouncing around, I know, but I want you to talk a little bit more, because as you mentioned, I think people are concerned about the safety of the trail, particularly where it comes across the rack bridge in the area immediately before it. So could you talk a little bit more about what you've done to improve the safety there and how people should feel reassured that it's okay to use it?
Sure. I'm going to have Julia start with this one because she really spearheaded that project.
Yeah, the area that we call the gateway to Reading, the Craigs Lake area, when we took a look at that, decided
Tell me why.
Looks like Alex needs to mute.
We looked at several ways that we could improve the safety of the trail. Of course, the best thing you can do to keep a trail safe is to get more people on your trail.
Right.
So a lot of what you're doing is making it, look better, look more inviting, be more inviting if it's safer. In the area around Reading, we use some techniques that can work in other urban areas, especially. One is that we cleared out a ton of vegetation that over the years, of course, grows up. But we took out a lot of vegetation that was blocking sight lines, because even though it was a ground level trail, you felt like you're in a tunnel sometimes because of the vegetation and the fencing. We cleared all of that out. We're going to keep that lowered. We had great help from our neighbors. The Castor service company is a property owner there, and they helped us with their side of the fence, clearing out vegetation. We also added, we already had some lights in that area, but we were able to make them much brighter with different light bulbs and different technologies. So we've improved the lighting through that section of trail. Technically, the Schuylkill River Trail is closed at night, but we do know that people are sometimes out on the trail. You can have a very dark day, so it was appropriate there to make sure that there was adequate lighting through that section. Something new that we're doing is we have added surveillance cameras to that section of the trail. So we have the entire thing covered. We don't do a constant, monitoring of that. They're more responsive. We have the ability to respond to something we've heard about, or if something's happening, or if there's a pattern of something happening, we can go and look at those. The district attorney's office and the police have access to those cameras as well, to that information. And then the other thing we're doing is just making the trail more welcoming with things like proper signage, so people know they are where they're supposed to be, or where they're headed, that sort of thing. We've been looking at some areas after you cross over the Rack Bridge, which, by the way, we're not calling the Rack Bridge anymore, but we don't have a name. After you cross over the Rack Bridge,
If you get a good donor, you can name it after them.
maybe. As you go through the college, and then you go to the Riverside Trail that Elaine had mentioned isn't really up to quality yet. That's another area where we can see ourselves adding some of the safety techniques to create a more welcoming trail, a trail that's better used by people to help keep the trail welcome, keep people safe, and to encourage them to be on the trail.
One of the ways that I think could be useful to attract more people to the trail is to have feeder trails coming into it. And I know there's some activity here in Berks County, but are you aware of initiatives in that area, and how much do you work with them and encourage people to do that?
Certainly, there's a lot going on in Reading right now. I know that there's a plan being done for walkability and of the streets that I can't think of the name of the project, but that Reading is working on with Simone Collins is the landscape architect working on that. And we've been participating in those meetings, and they talk specifically about, they're not talking about the Schuylkill River Trail, but it's always the front of their thinking. The people are going to connect down there. Their goal is to get people around Reading, connect all the have the safest walkways and travel spaces in Reading, but also connecting to the trail. In less urban areas, there are plenty of trails, major trails and minor trails that connect with us. The Neversink Trail, or rather the trail that goes down by Berks Nature, that I can't think of the name of, that connects directly.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
And there is dedicated signage, just letting people know that that's what's going on. You can connect to this other trail. All the way up in Schuylkill County, we cross the Appalachian Trail in a much more rural setting. And what we try to do there is, at those crossings, we try to announce them, have some signage, have some interpretive material. For instance, for the Appalachian Trail, there's some interpretive materials up there. Other places, just signs so people know where they are, give them a sort of a map in their minds of how these trails connect to one another.
So you encourage communities and organizations to try to think of ways to connect. I know there's some in the West Reading area. The Berks Nature connects in a little bit in what they're doing.
Yes.
There's
And of course,
conversations about doing stuff along the riverfront in the city.
and we're also a member of the Circuit Trails, which for Philadelphia, Montgomery, Chester, for that whole area of the trail, not all the way to Schuylkill County, but from Reading and on down, they do a lot of that work, the Circuit Trails, because they are all about connecting all of these trails. And of course, we're partners with them. We're part of that circuit. The other thing that's interesting is that the Schuylkill Trail is other trails also. There are a lot of co-located trails, they call it. For instance, the 9/11 Trail, which is a memorial trail dedicated to the September 11th tragedy, that will connect. This is the trail that will connect the different sites of the attack on 9/11 and the area where the plane crash was. Parts of the 9/11 Trail are on the Schuylkill River Trail. So we not only have the crossing of other trails and the meeting of trails, but we are several trails in several places. That's why sometimes you'll hear different names for some of these trails.
But I want to add to that, part of our mission as a heritage area and in our strategic plan is to support other groups developing connecting trails. So, and that support would take a form of technical support. Our mission is focused pretty primarily on the Schuylkill River Trail in terms of designing and constructing and building, ourselves. But we are here as a resource for other groups with technical support to kind of help them navigate how to get this done.
I want to, if there are people with questions, please ask them. Michelle Smith, I think she has a question here. Michelle, if you want to ask it.
Sure. For those of us who live in the area who would need to drive to where we would connect to the Schuylkill, is there any thought about putting any kind of circular sections in so that we could walk the trail and then still get back to our vehicle without having a whole lot of problem getting back from where we started?
There are some sections of the trail that have, like the towns have taken that on. I'm thinking of Royersford right away, where they are designing, we have our Schuylkill River Trail, and then they are designing their own trail system to create a loop so that people on their lunch break could do a 2-mile loop. The Schuylkill River Trail, though, is meant to be a, destination end-to-end trail with spoke, it is the spine that would have spokes. So Julia, do you want to add to that?
I think the thing there is that while most people do an up and back trip on the trail, Loop trails are great if you can find it in the areas where there are loops. And what we are seeing is that there are more and more of those. Montgomery County now has a trail on the other side of the river from the Schuylkill River Trail that goes up through their Schuylkill Valley Park and up that could eventually be a really great loop. Down in Phoenixville near the canal, you can actually walk on, there's a couple loops there because there's a loop for paddlers down there. You can go up the canal and down the river and do a loop, but you can also do some trail loops in there because there are existing trails that connect to the Schuylkill River Trail. We support that. We would like to help people with that, but we don't specifically focus on that.
What's your goal for the use of the trails? I mean, in terms of how many people, how active do you want to see it be? Any volume sense of people using the trail?
Our goal is to have a trail that anybody can use. Of course, we'd like to see big numbers. That means that people are appreciating and loving the trail and that it's getting well used and our money is worth it. But we're not as concerned about the numbers as we are about reaching as many people as we can and providing this asset to the communities that we go through. Obviously, in Philadelphia on the Boardwalk Trail, you're going to have more people. It's a very dense urban area. Up in Schuylkill County, where some of the most beautiful sections of the trail are, you're going to have smaller crowds. But having that link this entire region from Philadelphia all the way up to past the mountains in Schuylkill County, you're reaching into so many different communities and so many different landscapes that I think the numbers grow exponentially as you build these different sections, but they're always going to be very big differences. As you make those connections, the numbers just soar in terms of who's using the trail. We also, I just want to mention, we had a huge soar in usage during the pandemic. In some parts of the trail, usage doubled.
Oh, really?
In other parts, it was about 140% of what it normally is. And that stayed fairly high. I think people really needed that outdoor recreation opportunity during the quarantine periods of the pandemic. And thank goodness it was there for people. And I think that many people, that's how they got introduced to the trail and they're still out using it.
My goal is that when this trail is finished, that people come from far and wide and they spend multiple days on this trail. It's a long distance trail that you can't do in one day. So that much like the Great Allegheny Passage, that this trail develops into a destination that people will come from far and wide to go and spend their vacation and stay along the trail, get to know all the towns, and use their bikes as their mode of transportation between, or their kayaks. That is eventually the goal for this trail.
That's a good ambition, and we'll give you 5 years to get there.
Well, we're getting there.
Yeah. If people want to learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
The best way to do it is to get on our website, schuylkillriver.org. And you can go in so many directions on our website. You can learn more about the water trail. You can learn about the trail. You can learn about our events, our conservation efforts. And if you follow us on social media, you can keep updated all day, every day with what's going on. And those links are on the website.
Great. Any closing comments, Elaine, Julia, that you want to leave our audience and the people who are going to watch us in their leisure?
Thank you for having us. This has been a great opportunity for us to see all these people and to share this information. And please get back in touch with us on any questions that you have.
Yeah, and when we come into your town, please join the public meetings, and we'd love to see you there, and we'd love to see you at any of our events.
If we can help publicize that, that's great. This trail, this project, and it's more than just the trail, it's the capturing the river and bringing it back and making it important again, is potential to be really transformative for our community, for our region. Thank you for this work. It's great stuff.
Well, join us.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I want to remind you that we do have a spotlight program next week on yet another interesting community asset, the Colebrookdale Railroad. We look forward to seeing many of you there. Elaine, Julia, thank you and your team for all the hard work you're doing. It's great stuff.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great day. And get out on the
Bye.
trail today. It's gorgeous.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Thank you, everybody.